Hi, this is Mike at Gamefromscratch. Welcome back to our ongoing MonoGame Tutorial series. This is actually sort of a setup tutorial for an upcoming tutorial I'm doing on 3D assets in MonoGame, 3D programming. The text version is actually already available and the video version is in progress. But one of the big problems with working with 3D models in game development is, especially if you're not an artist, getting one that actually works. The process of exporting something textured working from a tool like, say, Blender into a game engine like MonoGame is fraught with problems, especially when you don't know if your code is the underlying issue here. So what I'm going to do is quickly walk through creating a simple textured cube and showing you the process of getting it from Blender to MonoGame. And that's it. So I'm not specifically covering the Blender process. I'm going to tell you in detail what I'm doing so you can recreate the process yourself, but I'm not actually going to say why I'm doing any of this stuff. If you want more details on working with Blender, I have a very comprehensive set of tutorials on Gamefromscratch.com, both in video form that do 1-hour lessons teaching you all of Blender, or a step-by-step text one on creating game assets specifically in Blender. So the Blender specifics, I've got you covered there. This is not the purpose of this tutorial. This is just about creating an asset that works. So without further ado, let's jump on in. Obviously, you're going to need Blender installed, and here it is. And all we're going to do is take this cube model, your default model here, and texture map it, and then export it out. That's all we're going to try and accomplish here. I'm going to try and describe everything I'm doing as I do it. Unfortunately, Blender is sort of second nature to me, so I start doing things without thinking about it. So if I skip over something, I apologize. But what we want to do is make sure that this guy is selected. You select something by right-clicking. For example, here I right-clicked the light to have it selected. So I right-click and it's outlined with this yellow outline. That's exactly what we want. Now I'm going to get us a little bit more space. You don't need to do this per se, but I want this window gone. And you can do that by hitting T. And now what I want to do is split this window in half so I can load up a texture window. Just grab this corner and just drag it over like so. So now we've got room for the two different windows. And down here in the bottom corner of every window, you can configure what type of window it is. And we want to turn this one into a UV image editor window. This is where you apply your texture coordinates to images. So with our image texture, our model selected over here, switch over to edit mode, like so. And by default, that's the middle mouse scroll wheel I'm using to pan in. By default, you can see all the vertices are selected. You can verify this by pressing A, which is select all, deselect all. So A again, so you can make sure that everything is selected. That's exactly what you want to have. Now, go to Mesh, UV Unwrap, and then Smart UV Project. And this is basically creating a flat layer so that you can draw a 2D image on top of a 3D shape. And the Smart UV Wrap just does a lot of the work for you, makes it really easy. Not always the most efficient results, but easy. And as you can see over here in the UV display, all of a sudden all of our cube's polygons have been flattened into a single shape that we can now draw over, which is exactly what we want. Now we want to create a texture to apply on top of this. First, let's go ahead and do a save here. So we're going to save this guy to the desktop, and we shall dub the, let's see, desktop, and we shall call you MonoCube, and save. Okay, so now over here on the right hand side, assuming if you don't see this window by default, make sure that, okay, pun not intended, make sure that your view setting here is that you're in default mode, and it should be here unless you've changed your settings from factory. And what we want is this grid looking guy for textures. Just click there, and it's got a texture for us. What we want to do is go ahead and set its type. So drop type down and select image or movie, like so. Now scroll down a bit, and we want to create under the images area here, create a new texture, call it MonoCube texture, like so. And we're just going to want to go, this is where you would normally draw your texture, whatever your shape is. So if this was a dice, we'd draw all the different, dots around the edges of your dice, whatever. But we're just going to go ahead and create a color grid instead. A color grid is often used for checking to see if your UV coordinates look good on a surface. So just go ahead and create that. And it creates this texture for us. So that's ideal. And now what we want to do is come over to our UV view over here, and this menu right here, select it. And it automatically zooms in on us. So just use your scroll to zoom back out, and you can see. So now these texture coordinates, here's your texture map. So everything under this map, this face will get that portion of the texture, this face will get that portion, etc. And you'll notice there's this asterisk beside the image. That means that it's not saved yet. So we're just going to go ahead and save it. We're going to save it externally. You can pack the image directly into the blend file, but for exporting, obviously, it's not always the most consistent way that things are supported as internally packed files. So we'll do it as an external file. So save it as an image. We'll keep it with the monocube texture name. We'll save it as a ping. That works for me. And just go ahead and save that. So now you'll see the texture here on source is set to that PNG file we just created. And that's perfect. So now all we really have left to do here is set up the texture mapping. So we're going to scroll down again in the Textures tab, scroll down to Mapping, and switch to UV, and then select your map, like so. Okay, and that's it. We are done in Blender. You can go over here to your 3D view and click this guy to switch your view over to texture, and you can see your image is properly textured, and we're set and ready to export. Now, with this shape still selected and just it selected, so you see my light's not selected, my camera's not selected. I just want the single object to be selected. Go up to here, let's do a quick save and do a file, and then we'll do an export. And the two most popular formats, the two most popular non-trivial formats anyways, are Colada, which is a DAE file, or Fbx, which is an Fbx file. None of them work really, really great from Blender. We're going to use Colada today. It works probably the most consistently, at least in my opinion. We're going to save it out. Again, monocube.dae. Now, on the other end, MonoGame's content pipeline uses something called ASIMP, or ASIMP, which is the open source asset importation library for bringing the file in. It supports a number of different file formats as well. So if one doesn't work, try another format. So here's the exporter for the Colada settings. And you see down here, we've got a few configurable settings that we can go through. And there's a couple of key ones we're going to want to do. First one, we're not exporting our entire scene. We just want to select the mesh that we've got selected. So choose selection only. And next up, we want to include UV textures. I don't know why this isn't set by default, but if you want your texture mapping to be exported, click that guy. And that's it. So we'll go ahead and export that out now. And we now have, if we look on our desktop, there is the generated DAE file. And we should be good to go. Now, at this point in time, we're about to move into code land. And like I said, it's really frustrating to think that your code doesn't work when in reality, it's actually the asset you're working with. And a lot of times, the way something looks inside of your content tool, like Blender, etc., when it's actually exported out to a file, it's not always the most consistent result. So a lot of times what's very handy to do is to use an intermediary viewer to see how your results look. And if you go to search for Fbx Convert, or Fbx Converter, and it's version 2013.3 is the most recent version, and this is something that Autodesk makes available as a free download. Just go ahead and download it. It's available for Windows and Mac, and it is this guy. And this is a converter, but it's also got a viewer built in, so we can see how our texture actually looks. So just go over here and say Add Fbx Viewer. The first time it might download it for you, but then it's up and ready to go. And now we just go File, and go to our desktop, select Colada as our type, and open up our model. And here you go. You can see everything worked out exactly as we want. Now, the fact that it's upside down, ignore that. That's a side effect of Blender and Autodesk, so Maya, Max, etc., use different coordinate system for what is up. It's not a really big deal. You can just you can basically rotate 90 degrees and fix it quite simply. And then game engines use different values here as well. It's a topic for a different day, but it's a very easy thing to fix. So if your exported object is perfectly fine, just oriented wrong, don't worry about it. That's something we'll address later on, not important. But here you can see our textured model works just fine in the viewer. So we know it works in Blender, and we know it works in this viewer, so it should now work in your code. Now you don't have to load this guy up, but it is a good source of peace of mind. So now that we know that our model works, let's take a look at the code involved. And I've already written the code. Like I said, this is for an upcoming tutorial. The text version of this post is already available on Gamefromscratch.com. I just got to go ahead and make the video of it shortly. So I'm not explaining this code at all. I'm not even really going to go through the code at all. I'm just basically going to show you the content pipeline portion of it, and that's about it. So we're going to come in here and load up our content pipeline and start from scratch. So even though you delete something here, by the way, it still lingers. So go into here and make sure that whenever you delete something from the content pipeline, delete it from the file system as well. All right, so imagine we were starting from a fresh content pipeline at this point. Go Edit, add existing item. And let's do the texture map first, just because. So add that texture first, and then edit, add existing item, and now we'll add the DAE model. And copy that in. And as I said, it uses ASIMP, which is Open Asset Impact Import Library right here. You can see it automatically figuring it out and doing the associated builder for us. So that's all that's really involved from our end. So we'll just go ahead and do a pipeline, let's do a save and a build. All right, so 2 successes and we're good to go. So we now have MonoCube, again, file extensions don't matter once you start talking with the loader, available for use. So we go over to our code. So if I go to the load, MonoCube right there, and then we're going to display it. Again, I'm not going to explain this code. It's available in the other tutorial. This is just about getting an asset in and working. And we'll just go ahead and run this now. And there you go. Once again, your orientation's all weird. It's because of the different axes in use in the exporting process. And as I said, it can be easily be fixed with a 90-degree rotation or by doing a transform in your graphics application before you do the export. A lot of the times you can actually do it as an option in the exporter tool and reorientate it, but for some reason right now, the Colada exporter does not have that option. But if I was to export it as FBX, you can see the manual orientation. I can set the up and the Y vector as part of the export process. For some reason that's borked in the Colada version, but generally it's a trivial thing to do. Otherwise you can literally, in Blender, select your object. For example, say I wanted to rotate it around the Y-axis here. I can just here, grab the whole thing in object mode and just do R for rotate, and then X for the axis, and then 90, like so, or RX 270. You reorientate it and then export it out. So it's not a huge deal that the orientation is wrong. That makes complete sense. But here is your asset in a game in Mono, running just fine. Same one that looked good in the viewer and looked good in Blender. So that's it. That's your end-to-end pipeline. It's a fairly simple thing to do, but there are enough caveats in there that I figured I would put together a video showing you the entire process. So once again, there's actually another video on actually the code that we used, all of this stuff involved. It's got a little bit more detail on everything we just discussed, and it's also got a link to this DAE file and the texture we just used. So if you just want to work in the code with an existing working model, it's available right there. I'll probably do a post specifically on dealing with the up axis in general at some point in the future. So if that point is confusing for you, don't worry, I'll cover it off a bit later too. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope for a change this video actually worked out fine, because this is my 4th attempt recording it. I keep having video card crashes or blank videos when I've actually finished it. So I pray this one actually worked, and I hope that was useful for you. Thank you very much. Goodbye.